Welcome to the Finance Marketing Podcast, a show that empowers finance professionals to market their businesses in ways that feel good and actually achieve results. I'm your host, Hillary. I've been working with folks in financial services to develop marketing strategies that work and create results-oriented marketing content since 2020. And I've learned a lot about what works in finance marketing, what doesn't work, and where financial services pros get stuck. Join us each Friday as we explore real, effective ways to market your finance business and connect with folks who truly embody your ideal clients. This week, I'm talking with Gary Sinderbrand, a former Merrill Lynch advisor and founder of BetterPath Training. Gary helps top financial advisors reach their full potential, and he is also the host of the podcast, If the Public Only Knew. Now, Gary brings an incredible wealth of experience to our conversation, having started his career at Merrill Lynch before eventually moving to UBS Private Wealth. And during his time at Merrill Lynch, he not only built a substantial business himself, but he also trained over 10,000 other advisors in closing clients and growing their practices. So what makes Gary's perspective particularly valuable is that he combines real production experience with his coaching expertise, something that he noticed was rare in the industry. So whether you're a new advisor struggling with client acquisition or an old hat looking to refine your approach, Gary's experience is backed up by the numbers, and his insights on building deeper client relationships through listening and outcome-based planning are absolutely invaluable. You will not want to miss this episode. Let's dive in. Gary, I'm so excited to have you on this episode of the Finance Marketing Podcast. How are you today?
Doing fine, Hillary. Thanks for having me.
Good. Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. I would love to start if you could just give our listeners a brief overview of who you are, how you help advisors, and kind of what brought you here.
Okay. I'll try and focus on the brief portion of it. I joined Merrill Lynch as a way too young financial or account executive shortly after I graduated college with a degree in abnormal animal behavior. Little did I know how much that would figure into my future role. Made all the mistakes you could make, stopped listening to everybody explain to me how to sell product to customers, and started thinking in terms of customers seems a little bit temporary. I want relationships, I want clients. So essentially, I figured out I had two ears and one mouth. I should start to listen twice as much as I spoke. And I started finding things out about people that I never thought I would find out. Primarily, what I learned going into my second year was that when it comes to investments, people, by the very nature that they have money to invest, are successful. But on the investment side, they may have opinions, but they don't have the core knowledge and the discipline necessary to get there. So, listening more than I spoke and really hunting for what really frightened people the most drove me in a direction that at the time very few other advisors were following. I started to accumulate a lot of assets, a lot of high quality accounts from the outside, and was very successful by any measure at a very young age within not just the Merrill Lynch system, but with all of the major advisory firms that were out there. Sometime in the late 80s, after the crash, I was asked by a member of senior management if I could share what I was doing with a few of my peers because they knew my opinion of the traditional training programs was not very high. I put a program together with another friend of mine who was following a similar, what I would call an outcomes-based approach in managing their client book. And we did a pilot program, which, based on all the numbers they wanted to measure going forward, really struck a chord with the other financial advisors. It wasn't that we were smarter than them. It wasn't that we were more productive than them. We had just found a way to convert our business from transactional or traditional brokerage into much more advisory and fee-based, where the compensation was based on an outcome over extended periods of time, as opposed to coming up with some stock idea or a cheap bond. That pilot hit, and as a result, over the next 10 to 12 years, myself and my training partner stayed in production full time, building very large businesses, but we also spent a good amount of time traveling and working with other Merrill Lynch financial advisors, many of whom were 1 or 2 years in the business, many of whom could have been 30 years in the business. And we would do that in a multi-part program, 2 days of them coming to us in a large group, I had the first day, my partner had the second day. And then the key to it was the follow-up. 30 days later,
Mm.
we break them up, put them in small rooms, and go around the room. We gave you 5 or 6 things to try. We hope you tried at least one.
Mm.
And it was kind of an early version of a mastermind group. We didn't realize it at the time. And the results literally blew us away.
Wow.
We weren't really teaching at that point as opposed to exchanging the experiences and kind of the wisdom gained that these financial advisors accumulated using these takeaways that we gave them after the first 2 days. And as a result, we saw some pretty dramatic increases in a very short period of time, even measured against other groups. Did that for 10 or 12 years, probably trained over 10,000 Merrill Lynch advisors. Many of them came back time and again.
Mm.
We had reunion programs. It just kept going. And
Mm.
as a result, some of those advisors are among the most productive people out there today, many of whom are still at Merrill. Some have
Mhm.
moved on to independence, some have gone elsewhere. Merrill went through some management shakeups in '02, decided it was time to go. I moved over to UBS Private Wealth in New York City and stayed in production there for a while. And then ultimately decided to transition to kind of a different phase of my life.
Mm.
I'd been managing money for 3.5 decades. I've been training other FAs for a large portion of that. There were a lot of good FAs out there. There were a lot of coaches out there with no production experience at all, but there wasn't both.
Mm.
And I realized maybe the thing that I can do is work with advisors that many of whom I've trained, many of whom I've yet to meet, and provide them the training and coaching and consulting they need as we move into this next phase where there's some pretty significant things occurring in wealth management.
Mm.
And it allowed me to kind of scratch a few itches I've always had, such as I always wanted to live in Colorado full time, lived most of my life on the East Coast. So kind of moved myself out to there, somehow got hired on as a ski instructor and fell in love with that aspect of teaching as well. So
Yeah.
I do both. The consulting work allows me to pay for my addiction to teaching skiing. So
Mm.
those two go together. So for the past several years, I've been basically working almost one-on-one with very senior advisors and helping them prepare their legacy, helping them prepare their books of business, which many of which have grown substantial,
Mm.
500 million in assets, a billion in assets, helping them prepare to transition that book to a next generation FA, which is a whole other
Mm.
story and topic for another time. But there's plenty of work to do. And over the next 5 to 8 years, there's close to $15 trillion that will transition from FAs of my vintage down to FAs that never went through the same experience I did
Mm.
or my colleagues did in building a book from zero.
Mm.
So there's some real challenges ahead for the industry.
Well, Gary, your story is fascinating. There's so many things I want to follow up with you on. And I think the first thing that I want to go back to is something you said at the beginning. You said you realized you had two ears and one mouth. You wanted to spend more time listening, and that had a real impact on the clients who signed on with you and who stayed with you for long periods of time. And it sounds like you also brought that into your coaching or training programs. You mentioned, you had a 30-day follow-up with advisors where you didn't do a whole lot of teaching. You just listened and you were kind of blown away by the approaches. Can you talk a little bit more about the impact of that in your work with clients and your work with advisors, how important you think that is?
So we can break it down into kind of two segments. As it related to clients, I came to the conclusion clients inherently who have money to invest are successful in some aspect of their lives, whatever it might be. They've done something where they can accumulate excess capital that they'd like to basically do something with in the future. What that may be and what it may cost is up for grabs. We don't know. So I would spend an extraordinary amount of time listening, not to a client tell me, well, I want to make X amount of percentage in the market because, that's what my neighbors are doing, but listening to what mattered to them most in their life. So my initial conversation with the client would be to pose questions that were provocative, that would cause them to think, that would allow them to give me answers that didn't have dollar signs in front of it. Because my goal was to ascertain a couple of different things. First thing I was trying to figure out when I was dealing with a prospective client was, do I want this client? Do I want this person as a client?
Mm.
Are they teachable? Can I teach them the basic fundamentals that I'm going to use so we have a relationship that can survive uncertainty? Because when you invest, there's uncertainty. There's
Mm.
uncertainty as to what happens along the way. There's uncertainty to outcome. There are many of those we can mitigate, but it's almost impossible to get rid of all of them. So the more information I have, the better equipped I am to plug in a set of solutions that are going to match what I learned from the client.
Mm.
And I would always start those relationships by making what I would call an investment introduction. And that would be a small chart book, maybe 12 to 15 pages, had very little verbiage in it, but it basically just gave the client some baseline information that I had access to that I wanted them to understand as to the process we were going to follow to go from what we used to call point A to point B. Point B
Mm.
is the end of it. Point A is where you start. Stuff happens in the middle. A lot of that stuff we know about, a lot of that stuff we don't know about.
Mm.
But we come up with a basically an outcomes-based approach. That outcomes-based approach then goes through a few math filters, which have gotten fairly sophisticated, some better than others. And it defaults to, okay, if you do everything you say, and we know you have this much now, and you're going to invest this much more in the next 30 years, and this is what you want to do, and then there's going to be some expenses during that period, and maybe some other income during that period. What do these assets need to earn between now and the time we have to put them to work for you to get where you want to go?
Mm.
And it comes back with a number. Let's say that number is 6%. Client may look at it and say, no, I want to earn a lot more. And I would say, well, why? What do I need to put on the outcomes list that causes you to want to earn more than what's going to get you there?
Mm.
And we find out that's kind of an ego thing. And I say,
Mm.
okay, well, it's possible, but you'll have this excess cash. What would you do with it? Well, I'll just have it. Okay, great. You'll just have it. What if you never even made the initial objectives? Because based on what you want to do, what happens if the year before you need this to capitalize it, the market suffers a 20% correction?
Mm.
And they're like, would it do that? I said, it's done in the past. It can do it in the future. Why would you want that risk?
Mm.
And then the husband and wife would look at each other and go, no, we don't want that. And I'm very specific. You're hiring me. We're here. You're hiring me for an outcome. You're not
Mm.
hiring me to outperform your buddy.
Mm.
And I would be very clear about that. So if we move forward, you have to understand this is what we're going to do. You'll know everything I want to do, but you have to follow my guidance or I can't be responsible for the outcome.
Mm.
So with an individual client in that regard, it's I'm listening probably 80% of the time. I'm educating maybe 10 to 15% of the time, and I'm implementing the solution by pointing to it and say, this is what gets us here, and here's why,
Mm.
and here's what we have to
Mm.
do. So I'm not selling them. I'm not telling them about how great our research is, because what do they care? They're hiring me. They're not
Right.
hiring my firm's chief economist or chief market strategist. In a room with 15 other professionals, all of which got a much deeper baseline in that process, from how do you handle the interviewing conversation? How do you handle the mathematics? How do you do the transition? How do you explain fees? How do you talk about referrals up front with the client as a method of that you want to be paid? It's a bit different because you can give the same, let's call it textual information to 15 or 20 pretty bright people. How they apply it and what they do with that is going to be completely different.
Mm.
Some people are going to put their own spin on it, it's not going to work. Some people are going to put another spin on it, it's going to work better than it ever did.
Mm.
So at those follow-up meetings, we had basically baseline knowledge combined with the experience of 15 to 20 people trying at least one of these five takeaways we gave them, going back and forth and reflecting on what happened. And that gets us into a different category, which is the wisdom category.
Mm.
Wisdom can only happen First, you have to have experience. It's a tough teacher because you've got
Mm-hmm.
to have it first. And then you've got to reflect on the experience. What comes out the other side is the wisdom.
Mm.
I didn't realize it at the time, but those early meetings that we did, and we did a lot of them, they were kind of an early version of what might be known in the marketplace now as a mastermind program.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, I'm going to be building a couple of those because I reflected on them a couple of weeks ago and I went, why didn't I think of that sooner?
Mm. Mm-hmm.
I've got so much experience doing it. And when I speak with my colleagues, my peers, the people I work with, every single one of them misses the ability to do that. So
Mm.
I know that was kind of a long-winded answer for that question, but
No, that was the perfect answer for that question. And I appreciate you kind of, going through it as it applies to when you're talking to clients and also as it applies to when you're working with advisors and how advisors can benefit from that kind of mastermind experience. As a former teacher, I used to teach college students freshman English, and we would spend so much of our time not just learning how to write and practicing writing, but then reflecting on that experience because I felt as though that was really where the lessons would be internalized and kind of cemented rather than just let's get through these assignments and move on. Of course, my students weren't as into that as I'm sure, mastermind participants are, but it just speaks to that point that I think being able to hear others' experiences and hear you talk about your own experiences just takes you to a higher level. So that's great. Now, Gary, one thing that you and I briefly chatted about before we hit the record button was this idea of a value proposition and how the value proposition has kind of lost its shine in the industry. And you think there's actually a more powerful way to set yourself apart, I believe. Can you talk to me a little bit about what you see as a value proposition and why that doesn't resonate with you as much?
sure. So if we think about the concept of value, there's a real difference between value and cost, right? Cost is whatever the price of the thing is, and you hope you're getting a good deal, but you don't know. The value comes in if you understand exactly what the outcome will be. So maybe a good example, Hillary, to use is one of these things, an iPhone.
Mm, mhm,
So an iPhone, let's just say if you're going to buy it and own it, it's $1,000. Now, that's the cost. I'm willing to pay for it. I've got experience. I know there's value there, but that's a cost. Well, let's
mm,
say that I could buy literally the exact same phone for $200.
mm,
Same thing. Which one has more value? Well, obviously, I'm getting a better value for 200 bucks because I know the outcome of what that can do.
mm, mhm,
When I propose to a prospect, they say, "Well, what do you do?" I provide comprehensive financial services to successful individuals who are concerned about their future, their children, and disposition of their business, as an example. Here's what that prospective client hears. Wah, 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 wah. Because they've heard it 1,000 times. Now, I make a statement. There's not even an interrogatory. I make a statement. What do I expect that prospective client to say? Oh, I've been looking for a guy that does exactly that.
mm,
That doesn't happen.
mm,
They nod, and what they're thinking is, "Ugh, God, how many times have I heard this?"
mhm,
Now, I look at it a different way. I think of it in terms that what I do as an advisor and what really competent advisors do is they provide an integral part of a family's ultimate success in something that is only secondary to their health.
mm,
You could argue, some FAs would argue it's before their health. So you're not there trying to sell them one thing or another. You're trying to figure out, as I'm talking to this prospective client, if I had to take a car ride with this person, would I want them to leave when I get to the first stoplight, the next town, the next state, or could I drive cross country with them? That's how
mm,
I'd think about it.
mm,
So I'm trying, just because you have money, just because you have an investment need, doesn't mean I'm the right person for you.
mm,
So I need to find out where your head's at and whether or not you're someone I'd like to work with.
mm,
So someone baseline of elevator pitch, whatever it might be, well, tell me what it is that you do. My response would be very short. Well, I do a lot of different things. Well, I'm not sure I understand. Well, I kind of work in the financial world, but whether or not I do what you need to do, I have no idea. Now, what I've done in a couple of ways is, first of all, anyone that has assets and money thinks that the advisory side, everybody wants their business. So I
Hmm.
approach it as if, look, I don't even know if I want to talk to you.
Hmm.
So they'll like, well, I'm not sure I understand. Well, let me pose a question a different way. When you look at your statements on your investments at the end of each month, can you look at every individual investment that you have and tie that investment to an outcome, whether it's a near term, middle term, or long term outcome that you've discussed with your advisor and position that asset specifically to get to that outcome? And normally you get this kind of look. I'm not sure what you mean. I just want to make money. And yeah, well, never heard that
Yeah.
before. Let me phrase it a different way. Do you have a target rate of return you've established with your advisor that you need to achieve over a long period of time to meet all your goals?
Mm.
Well, we just want to beat the market. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Why? Because that's our target. So in other words, all you're trying to do is outperform some index over which you have no control, and at the end you're going to hope that you have enough money to do the things you need to do.
Mm.
Oh, yeah, I guess so. So you're telling me you're with an advisor that hasn't solved that equation for you? No, he's a friend of mine, been with him a long time. We've made a lot of, yeah, the market's been up 4 out of the past 5 years. Everybody's made a lot of money.
Mm.
But in our current situation, do you think that's a strategy that'll just continue? Long-term markets average about 8%. Over the past 5 years, before the start of this year, those markets were averaging about 2.5 times that.
Hmm.
So I guess my question is this. If you're satisfied not to know where this all comes out and you're just going to kind of play it as it lays, we're probably not a good fit. If you're interested to know how this all comes out, I'm happy to do that assessment for you. I just need you to send me the most recent copies of your statements. We're going to have a 10 or 15-minute conversation after that. I'm going to tell you one of three things. First thing I may tell you is the advisor you're working with knows their stuff. You may not realize it, but they're doing all the right things. Stay with them, ask them to update whatever forecasting they did initially, and have a conversation with you.
Mm.
Second thing is your advisor buys good quality stuff. You've been doing okay, but there's no rhyme or reason to what you're doing. You started with half your money in equities 7 years ago. Now 70% of your money's in stocks. And if you're not familiar with the mathematics of loss, you should be, because you can really get hurt.
Mm.
Third thing is your advisor basically is treating you as if you don't have a brain in your head. Your portfolio is essentially a dumpster fire. You don't know what's going on, and you should transfer your assets to me immediately.
Mm.
Now, door number one, I may hear, I want to transfer it anyway because my advisor is retiring in 2 years
Mm.
and I need somebody I trust to take it over. Clearly, if you're not like, trying to sell me a bunch of stuff and you don't even want the business, I want to come to you. Door number two, I'm probably going to pick them up as well. And door number three, I'm going to insist they join me because I'm going to say, look, if you stay where you are, you're going to run out of money.
Mm-hmm.
And the point here, Hillary, is over the each one of those conversations, it didn't begin with me selling them on how smart my firm was or how great our
Mm.
products were. It began with me figuring out, does this person need help? Do I want to help them? Will they listen?
Mm.
So I received information again, ears 2x the
Mm-hmm.
mouth. And what I find is the more information I was able to get up front,
Mm-hmm.
the stronger that relationship became. The
Mm.
last thing, and then I'll pause, it's a well-known fact that when you're speaking with someone else and they're telling you the story of their lives and you're listening, intentionally listening and asking follow-up questions, the person speaking automatically assumes the person they're speaking to is smart.
Mm-hmm.
And
And cares.
it works, yeah. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why I ditched the value proposition a long time ago.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you kind of laying that out. And I do have some follow-up questions for you. I can see as a marketer the power of being honest with somebody, letting them know your advisor is doing all the right things. This is great. And them still wanting to work with you. Would you say that? I mean, it's probably hard to put a number to it, but would you say that, I don't know, half the time or more than half the time someone would want to come work with you simply because of that honest approach, or what, how would you quantify that?
It's there are times if I know the advisor and I know the advisor's doing the right thing, I'm really going to encourage them to stay put.
Mm,
And they may come back and say, "Well, you've done all this work. How do I compensate you?" Well,
mm,
you have friends, right,
mm-hmm,
who might not be with your same advisor. And if the situation comes up where you can do something for me, awesome, great.
mm,
Or I may know who some of their friends are. And I may say, I checked you out on LinkedIn and I see you're friends with so and so and so and so. Yeah. Could I use your name as a reference
mm,
when I reach out to them? Of course you can. It's fine. Not a problem at
mm,
all.
mm-hmm,
So I'll find something that can benefit me on the other side.
mm,
You just don't know what's going to happen. Now, the good news is that if you look at the entire world of financial advisory, I would say less than 10% of FAs really know what they're doing. I
mm,
mean, from the perspective of they're going to take care of their clients no matter what. They're going to get them where they need to be, despite
mm-hmm.
the clients trying to interfere and get in the way from time to time. They're going to get them where they need to go.
Mm-hmm,
The rest of them, I mean, I lost track of how many outside statements I reviewed, and some of them I'm just like, I'm mystified as to
mm,
why they're positioned the way they are. Even
mm,
with some of my current advisees, we'll talk about certain things they're doing, and I'll ping them. I say, why are you doing that?
mm,
Well, the client owns Nvidia at 6 and the stock's 130, doesn't want to pay the taxes. And I come to find out the client's 80 years old, in good health, has 16 grandchildren.
mm,
I said, here's an idea. Why don't you have that client start to give that appreciated stock away? Because I'm sure the grandkids can use it. And 2 weeks later, they've opened 14 new accounts and 14
mm.
new relationships based on that. So there's always things that we can do, always things that we think about to get people where they need to be.
Wow. Okay. I'd love to dive into that a little bit further. When you say, well, you said, about 10% of advisors maybe really know what they're doing. They don't let the clients drive the bus. Is that kind of what you're saying? They
Pretty
keep them
much.
on track? What does
Yes.
that look like when the clients are driving the bus and the advisor kind of falls into that trap?
Okay. So there's three types of advisors. The first type of advisor that I use to train makes things happen. That your clients, your prospects basically may not know what the advisor knows, but they know the advisor knows it.
Mm,
So there's some expertise there. The second type of advisor is advisors that basically, watch things happen. Market
mhm,
changes, clients call, what do you think we should do here? What do you think we should do there? Okay, the client's going to feel more comfortable, doing this. So it's the client's money. So I'm going to take them out of the equity market in, you know, March of 2009 when it hit the
mhm,
bottom.
mhm,
The third type of advisor just sits back and wonders, WTF just happened. They're like, and they're afraid to pick up the phone. They don't want the phone to ring. They have no good explanation because they probably sold some product or maybe even a managed account, which might be down significantly, and they don't want to answer the client.
mhm,
Those fall into categories of people that basically are, I look at them like they've got a cart at the airport and it's got, every financial product out there, and people come around and say, "Ooh, tell me about this and tell me about that."
mhm,
And whether it fits or not, it doesn't matter. It's all backwards. So from the perspective of guiding the client, when the clients call and they say, "What do you think we should do?" And my response would be, I think we keep doing exactly what we were doing because every
mhm,
client understands that this is not just a fire and forget strategy. Markets change.
mhm,
And if I'm projecting a 6% return on a 50-50 allocation, and all of a sudden over the past 4 or 5 years, that 6% return is more like a 12% return. Well, then I don't need to have as high a allocation to a risk asset like equities as I did back then. So I'm
Mm,
constantly looking, okay, can I de-risk this account? And I
mm,
would call the client up, probably would have called him up the end of, let's call it 2021. 20 and 21 were big years in equities. And I would say, we're up to 65% in risk assets and 35% in rolling bonds, CDs, whatever it might be. And if I recompute everything from here, we don't need 6% to go forward from here. We only
mm,
need to make 5. So we're going to take the allocation to equities from 65 down to 45. We're going to bulk up our short-term bond investments to 55.
mm,
Well, aren't we going to leave something on the table? I don't know. What table is that? Are we
mm,
leaving money on the table? I said, I have no idea. And if the next person makes it, that's fine. It doesn't matter to us as long as we're plugged in
mhm,
to this endpoint. And now, we came out of the gate a lot faster than we thought. We can kind of cruise for a while.
mm,
And market
mhm,
turns, it goes the other way. We're not going to be hurt that much. But what I'm doing is I'm increasing the probability of success by being able to go into assets that have more predictability rather than less.
mhm,
Oh, yeah, yeah, you talked about that. Okay, go ahead and do
mm,
it.
mm,
But
mhm,
I educated them up front so they
mhm,
understood. And I have to remind them. But I go back to what I told them when no emotion was on the table.
mhm,
Clients are very subject to emotional bias when it comes to their own money.
mm.
And that's just reinforced by the algorithms that feed their news feeds every day.
I can feel it happening to me as
Yes,
we
indeed.
speak. So, Gary, would you say, are there advisors out there? Not being an advisor myself, this might be a personal question. Are there advisors out there who might make these changes to clients' portfolios without telling the client?
Well, yeah, there's plenty of advisors out there that have full discretion, especially in the RIA world. I never accepted discretion because I wanted my clients to kind of ride along in the bus and
Mm,
understand what was going on. I think that's
hmm
only fair because if a change to an allocation shows up, normally the advisor's running a model, and they're running a model which maybe they did on their own, and that's fine. But that model may not necessarily match the outcome the client is seeking. So
hmm
rebalancing a particular account may have some tax implications. I wanted my clients invested in the process, and as a result of that, I kept my book of clients relatively small.
mm,
If I had more than 125 or 150 households, I would affiliate them with other advisors so I had the time to focus on the people that are most productive. That engagement, Hillary, led to long, long relationships that accumulated additional assets, referrals from their friends, and turning a lot of these people into incredibly close friends over time.
mm.
So you can't do that with 500 households.
Right, right. Well, Gary, this has been fascinating. Is there anything before we kind of wrap up our conversation that you think is pertinent for the advisors in my audience to hear that we maybe haven't talked about yet?
Yeah, a couple things. First, as an advisor, if you don't realize you have the greatest job in the world, you're a little too myopic in the way you look at it. You get to choose who you work with. You get to choose the hours you work. You get to choose literally what your income's going to be. Even more importantly, you get to choose whether or not you're going to leave the world a better place, one household at a time. The second thing is this: you need to look at every household or every client you serve and come up with a methodology to treat them as if they are the only client you have.
Mm,
If the future of your entire life depends on keeping that person in the game, happy and satisfied. Last, if you're a senior advisor and you don't have a firm plan on how you're going to transition to the next generation, your clients are going to leave.
mm,
If you're over the age of 60, you've probably noticed your referrals are slowing down because they don't know what your legacy plans are. But even more importantly, you've got a whole next generation of your own clients, heirs, and maybe their heirs. And right now, when you retire, 50% of them are going to walk out the door. Period. End of story. If you don't have a plan in place to transition these people you've cared for over decades, you need one. It's one of the things
mm,
I really focus on right now. As it relates to the current volatility, if you don't have a rebalancing discipline, that you've put in the past, an allocation that basically aligns with the goal, pretty good time to get one, regardless of what the market's doing. Forget the noise. It's beyond belief how noisy it is out there. Focus on the signal. Fortunately, if you go back over the past 5 years, maybe even 10 years, equities have so far outperformed. Even if you allow that equity allocation to really grow beyond where your client currently needs it, go rebalance it as if all that money's cash today. Would you put it to work the same way? If the answer is no, then you're on the right track and you need to get to work and basically plug that back into the client's outcome. So there's always things to do. I think we're in a really interesting period right now with what's going on demographically with the advisor population, with the generation that's about to inherit, and then the socioeconomic and political situation just throws things in that are, I'll be kind, random. So
it's a great, kind choice of words. Well, Gary, this has been a great conversation. If people want to get in touch with you, where's the best place to do so?
So a couple of places. They can find out about me on my LinkedIn page, which is just search me on LinkedIn. They can also go up on my website, which is BetterPath Training, all one long word, betterpathtraining.com. And up there, they'll find links to a variety of things. But even from the public's perspective, Hillary, I now do a podcast titled If the Public Only Knew, which I'd love to invite you on at some point. And that tries to bridge that conversational gap that always occurs between what the advisor is saying and what the client actually hears. And then the other way for what the client is saying and what the advisor is actually thinking about. I'm kind of in the middle of that. And that's been a pretty interesting evolution that I plan on continuing with for quite some time. So they can find me there as well. And in my website, they'll also see a link to a Patreon site where all you've got to do is give me an email and everything's free. That primarily right now is for advisors to go and look at. And I'll continue to upload things there as we go. All I need is an email.
Great. Well, I'll link to all of those things in the show notes. I do want to say I was looking at your podcast this morning before we got on our call together, and it looks like a fantastic podcast. It's something I've never seen before, so I can't wait to listen to it. So I'll just give you an extra plug there for that. And thank you so much for coming on and sharing so much great information with me today, Gary. I really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure, Hillary. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of the Finance Marketing Podcast. If you're eager to market your business in a way that feels good and actually gets results, sign up for the Finance Marketing Podcast newsletter in the show notes so you never miss another episode. If you liked what you heard today, please be sure to subscribe to the show on your favorite listening app and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. We'll see you back here next Friday.